Hi everyone, my name is Ebony and I'm from Eastern Community Legal Centre. Today I'm going to be providing you with a little bit of information on disaster preparedness and insurance. So my presentation will be more so looking at things to do before a disaster happens. Anita will be more looking at after a disaster happens, navigating that claims process, things that we should do, not touching things, taking photos, etc, etc. So welcome. I'd just like to start off today with an acknowledgement of country. We've already had a beautiful one from Sue, but just quickly I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and that we're on Wurundjeri country of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to all elders, both past, present and emerging, and extend that to all Aboriginal people present here today. So, ECLC, Eastern Community Legal Centre, what we do is we provide legal information and advice. We are free and we are local, so probably the closest office that we have is the Healesville office nearby here, or Boronia, one of the two, Boronia. So you're welcome to, you're probably best to call up and see whether we've got any availability for appointments and come on down just in case we're busy. We also provide community legal education. Surprise, surprise there. We do partnership projects with other services and respond to community need where it arises. This presentation is being recorded. It might be recorded, it is being recorded. If you don't want to take part in that, then just let us know. I think Sue's already done the rounds and double checked who's not okay with that, so that's good. If you have any problems or require legal assistance, you can either call ECLC or you can call Disaster Legal Help Victoria. So Disaster Legal Help Victoria, this logo down here, they've sort of helped us to put together some of the content for these slides. The laws that we're referencing in here, where we do reference laws, they're current as of today, however they do change, so just something to be mindful of. We are not in a position where we can provide financial advice, and we're also not really providing legal advice here today. It's more of an information session. So if we need to have a follow-up session with you or book something in, then we can do that and provide more sort of tailored answers to your questions. So what are we going to be looking at today? Firstly, why do we need insurance? Ways to be legally prepared for a disaster, getting and checking your insurance, and what to do if a disaster happens, which will be Anita. So, looking at the context. So we know that with our changing climate, Victoria has already increased by 1 degree. Once we get to the 1.52 degree area, things are going to get a bit more nasty. So we're going to look at having an increase in the amount of fires that are happening and the intensity of the fires that are happening. We're also going to see a decrease in the average rainfall. However, at the same time, like we've seen with the flooding, we're going to see more intense downpours, which is going to be raising our risk of floods, bushfires, also the number of hot days, heat waves and things like that are also going to become more apparent. So, looking at where we are and the fire risk level of where we are, this is a pretty frightening statistic here, but Belgrave is actually in the top 10 most fire-prone towns of all of Australia. So down here, where we've got the red and the purple, this is very high fire risk danger. So getting insurance, making sure that your insurance is going to be sufficiently covering you for fires is going to be very, very important. Same sort of thing for floods. So this in 2017 said that this was going to be a 1 in 100 year flood event likely to happen in this area. As the impacts of climate change intensify, probably likely that we're going to see that come down to maybe a 1 in 10 year event. So we'll also be looking at flood insurance and how that sort of differs from storm insurance as well. So this is a quick sort of summary of what we can do to be legally prepared in a disaster. So we need to first of all make sure that our insurance is up to date. Creating an inventory list with photos or ideally a video of your sort of big value items is quite important. especially when you're making contents insurance claims. It's very, very likely that they will ask for that. Interestingly, if your home is completely destroyed, they may not ask for that, but we'll look at that a little bit later. Getting all your important documents together, so having them all scanned and all in one place, so that if you need those down the track, if they've been burnt or they've been damaged by stormwater, you've still got those accessible. A way to keep those safe is to keep them in a weatherproof place or store electronic copies, and keeping a list of emergency contacts. So this is some really basic sort of 5 points, but we'll get into a little bit more detail later on. We can share the slides, yes. Yep. Cool. So, if you can take one thing away from today, if you can afford insurance, get it before a disaster happens. You're much better off having a higher excess on all of your insurance and still having insurance but paying a lower premium than you are to have no insurance at all. We get insurance because when we have insurance, this reduces our financial risk in a disaster. So our home's destroyed, someone can help us, cover the costs of rebuilding or getting our contents back up and running. Insurance is relevant to not only homeowners but also renters. So contents insurance is obviously going to be much more relevant to renters, but that's just something to consider as well. Being prepared by having adequate insurance helps us to avoid financial hardship, fairly obvious, gives us security and helps us to get back on our feet. We need to make sure we've got sufficient insurance, so I'll cover that in a little bit more detail later on. If you don't have insurance, highly recommend you take it out. And a big issue across Australia today is underinsurance. So sort of getting back to this point here of making sure you've got sufficient insurance, but scary stat, about 80% of Australians are currently underinsured. So we'll look at some ways to avoid that. So, what do we think our main type or types of insurance are going to be we're looking at today? Anyone? Brave people? What's the big one? When you buy a house, you have to get it.
Home insurance.
Home insurance, 10 points. Very good. So we're going to be looking mostly at home and contents insurance, but we'll also touch on a few other different types of insurance that you might consider getting as well. So home insurance. Home insurance is also referred to as property insurance or home building insurance. This normally includes cover for the permanent fixtures in your house. So things that are stuck down in your house is a good way to remember it. So this covers your main dwelling, your garage, any outbuildings like sheds, and it may also include contents if you get home and contents insurance. However, these last two things, you definitely want to be double checking what's covered in your product disclosure statement to make sure that it's in there and that it's going to be covered if something happens. So the main two types of home insurance that you've got is sum insured. So this is the one that if you've got insurance, it'll say you're covered for up to $600,000. And I'll get into total replacement in a second, but essentially sum insured, it's not the value of your home, it doesn't sort of change depending on where the market's at the moment. This is the total amount that it's estimated to cost to rebuild your home. So if your home's completely destroyed, you need to have enough money in here to get your home rebuilt from scratch. This will be a specific dollar amount, as I mentioned, and if we don't have enough in our sum insured, which is the most common type of insurance, you're probably going to be underinsured and you'll need to cover that gap. Total replacement insurance is a much more comprehensive type of insurance. With comprehensive comes a little bit more expensive. This uses a different model where they will cover the full amount needed to replace a damaged property, regardless of what the cost is. So that obviously pushes your premium up a little bit. However, it reduces your risk of underinsurance quite a lot. You may have a little bit less choice of builders or decisions about the ways that things are repaired or replaced if we go that way. Not suggesting one or the other, because I can't give financial advice, just giving you some information on the two different types. However, total replacement does reduce your risk of underinsurance.
Can I stop in that?
Yep.
Do you mind going back to the previous
Absolutely.
slide? I've got the bottom one, total replacement, and it's junk insurance.
Okay. Why do you feel that?
Why do I feel that? I've suffered damage, right? The insurance doesn't want to, they've accepted the claim, but they don't want to do the repairs, so they've offered me money. I've gone out and got a quote. There's a big gap between what they're offering and what the quote is. And I've got an unlimited policy. So
we might talk about settlement offers later. So
yeah,
what that scenario is we're talking about an offer of cash settlement. So we might look at that a little bit later.
you know, and what they offer me has 25% builder's offer, which still it gives me a big gap between the quote and what they're offering. And yet I've got a project manager. I said, you keep the money, you get your contractor to do it for that price. I don't want the money. And they're not settling.
And that was total replacement
Total
insurance.
replacement, and I paid a fortune for it.
Sounds like that might be something that you can follow up with one of our specialist legal
No,
centres.
so it's selling that to anybody is junk as well.
Yeah, definitely not selling either.
No, I know.
Just giving you some information
Yeah,
on what it should be doing.
what it should be doing, but it's not doing it. I've got, first-hand experience with that.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know what it should be doing, so that for people like you, if it's not doing that, then we know that we might have a legal issue that we need to follow up with.
Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you for sharing. Okay. I thought the little boy had a question. I don't think he's overly interested in insurance. So this is what you might see when you go online, when you're comparing your insurance policies. Same sort of thing. Some insured sets a limit to the cost of rebuilding your home, and complete total replacement cover shouldn't set a limit to the cost of rebuilding your home. Now, how do we work out how much it's going to cost to rebuild our home? We're not builders. There's a lot of things to be taken into consideration. Obviously, the best way to go about it would be to have a builder come out to your home and have a look at it, but realistically, I don't know whether that's going to happen for everyone who's choosing to take out an insurance policy. Also not endorsing this, however, just giving you a potential tool that you might want to use. So if you go online, this is a builder's website. If you go online, you can put your address in here, and it will take into consideration the style of the house, what the slope of the land is. All of that information will already be in there for you because it's available. And then it'll give you a dollar amount here down the bottom of how much the rebuilding costs, estimate might be. If you need to get demolition done, roughly how much that might cost as well. So for instance, if we got $800,000 to rebuild our home, that's what we might want to make sure that we've got in our sum insured amount. Cool. Bushfire attack level. Has anyone actually heard of Bell before? Hannah? Yep. Okay. So Bell is especially relevant for you guys here in Belgrave because we know that it's one of the most at-risk areas to fire damage. This is essentially, if your home is completely destroyed, you need to rebuild it. The government has put in place structures where, or regulations that when you rebuild your home, it needs to be more fireproof or fire resilient, so that they don't have to keep preparing it every time there's a bushfire. It's a good concept for sure, however, it does push up your premiums if you are in a high bushfire area. So if you're in what they call a flame zone, that's going to be like deep in the bush, you could be having to cover your rebuilding costs up to $277,000 on top of what your original building costs were. So, yes, Anita.
Can I just share that I'm not deep in the bush and we are a flame zone.
There you go.
So we're on the side of a hill with trees surrounding, so
Yeah. Very
just
good.
for people's information.
Yeah. So, very, very good to check. Double check, depending on where you are. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward.
How can I find out my bell rating?
The fire brigade will do one. You have to pay, but I think they should do it for the area they're in for free.
Yeah. I think when you're taking out insurance, they might be able to, depending on the insurance company, they might be able to guide you through that process and help organise that for you. But it can be a bit expensive, so it's just something to take into consideration. Now, if we're going for our sum insured type of insurance, you may want to ask about something called a safety net of home protection, which essentially means if your home, if you're underinsured, or the amount that you were insured for under your sum insurance, if that's less than what it costs to actually rebuild your home, you've got a financial buffer of a certain amount. So if your sum insured was 400,000, then you have a 25% safety net. You can get some extra money from that as well. This is just it's not even a suggestion, it's just information. And it's all sort of going to add up by the end of it for sure. Now, things to take into consideration. So what is our bushfire attack level? Am I covered for the increased costs of how much that's going to add on to my premium? What are your cleanup costs? So these are things when you're going through your PDS, you need to take a really close look at. So cleanup costs are often capped at 5,000. Is this even in there? Is it not in there? Give your insurance a call and ask them specifically, is this covered or is this not covered? Temporary accommodation may be lengthier than you anticipated, so this is a really, really big issue. This is where a lot of our referrals come in from, is people who have been in temporary accommodation for more than 12 months and they're like, what do I do? My insurance, only covers me up to 12 months. It's definitely a legal issue that we deal with. So ask your insurer directly, what do I do if I'm out of my home for more than 12 months?
Can I just ask a question? On the clean-up costs,
Yep.
say you've had a building destroyed and they've cleaned it up, does it come out of your content or building? And most of the stuff that we cleaned up is out of content, this content, so this in the building.
That's probably a little bit too specific for our level of knowledge. I would say from the information we've got, there's usually an allocated fund for a capped amount for cleanup in the insurance. So it may come out of the build cost, but it might actually depend on your policy. It's probably a little too specific for us.
Okay, once again, for building, I had unlimited, and they tried to hit me with that, and I said, it's unlimited. I said, you never gave me the option. Some of the people you sent out here weren't worth a cent. I would have engaged my own people if they were trying to push the cost onto me. I actually fought it when I won, but it was quite a strenuous, it went on for years, the claim. And that's why I wanted to ask with this clean-up cost, how can
Absolutely.
it be, defined, is it part of building or is it part of content?
I wouldn't have a specific answer for that.
The building had to be cleaned up, and so did the contents.
Yeah.
A lot.
It's a tricky one.
I think it would depend on the insurer
Yeah.
and the policy.
But the insurer, they're all owned by one company.
They're arguing that they will
But your
be
policies
very
are all
different.
different.
Yeah.
So these are things that are good questions to ask your insurer while you're taking out insurance. Or if you already have insurance, ask them these questions about those sort of things.
Would it be an idea if it was made more obvious that if you're involved in a disaster and you're claiming that the local planning authorities can't cope, so you're likely to be very much more delayed than if you were just somewhere and a tree happened to fall on your house and you were the only one affected.
Sure.
This cumulative thing seems to have damaged so many.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a big shortage of builders at the moment, which makes everything a lot worse, and then you've got to get approval. So a lot of these things can really stretch out for quite a long time.
But there's special consideration about the length of time it takes to get approval, an unreasonably long length of time, 18 months and more in many cases, which isn't the fault of the person who has the property damaged,
Sure.
and isn't taken into account by anyone else, so it's the families that take the hit.
Yeah. As I mentioned, people can get stuck in very sticky situations, especially because things take a very long time in terms of rebuilding and starting from scratch again and getting approval and those sort of
Can
things.
you insure against that?
I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest.
I mean, it's obvious there's going to be more and more disasters, so
Yeah.
if there are more and more disasters, there's more and more families caught in this situation, and if the local authority can't cope dealing with it in reasonable timing, then it's an issue that insurers should take on board, and people should be aware, rather than naively think, oh, 12 months is fine, that's what they recommend, and
Yep.
obviously, we'll have got the building permission, planning permission, whatever permissions in good time.
Yeah. It can take a very long time, so it's a good thing to check how long they're going to be covering you for, make a backup plan if you get stuck.
But if you're someone caught in a disaster, what would be normal is no longer the normal.
Yes.
And if that advice isn't given to people really early on before they take decisions on what to do, whether to accept the lump sum payment. But if you don't know that it's going to take 18 months or more to get the permissions, then you're in a catch-22 situation.
Okay. Yeah, sure. All right, contents insurance. Contents insurance is going to be covering all the things that are inside your home, your contents. So this normally includes your furniture, your appliances, electronics. This normally includes things that you own, that are owned by any family members who live with you, and it doesn't cover things that are permanently attached to the building because they will be covered in your home insurance. Now, this is fairly important here too, and I'm sure some people have dealt with insurance agencies and had some challenges with this as well. With your contents, they normally give you the option of either covering you for replacement value, which essentially means that they will replace items new for old, or they should be replacing items new for old. That's what the cover is. And so that's if you've got a table and you can't get the exact same table back because you bought it from a friend, then they might give you a new table. The other type of insurance that they might offer to you is equivalent value. So this is a certain dollar amount. This has a few extra risks attached to it. So for instance, if you get a fridge that's covered for $500 and you just have the same insurance for 15 years, buying another fridge for the same price might be tricky. Once again, increasing your risk of underinsurance a little bit. So these are the two main types. Check your PDS. Look for the fine print of what they're saying is included and excluded in that. What other types of insurance do we think might add some additional protection? Let's go. Bang, bang, bang. Who's willing? Outside home and contents. Car, fantastic.
Income.
Income, great.
Life.
Life, another good one.
Business, if you're running a business from home.
Business, farm, great. Not going to get into those because there's too many specifics about each of them. So thank you to Legal Aid New South Wales. This is also still relevant here. Pretty basic checklist. Have I checked my PDS? And what's in there? What's the schedule? What's my sum insured for my building, if that's the one you're going to go with? Have you checked that against an online building calculator, like I mentioned earlier? Or get a builder to come out and have a look if you want to. What's my bell rating? So you should know what that is. And you need to make sure you have a certain amount for your contents. And you've checked that against, there's also online calculators that you can use for your contents as well. Now, this is where it starts to get a bit tricky. So these are some common exclusions. So for bushfires especially, you've got, if you try and get cover and then it's within 48 to 72 hours of you taking out cover and you're hit by a bushfire, you're going to end up in a very tricky situation, so get insurance as early as you can. Damage from scorching, burn marks and melting are often not covered, which is a bit confusing, to be honest. But something to look for in your policy. So often they need to have an actual flame affect your home for it to be covered. Damage from heat, soot, smoke and ash may not be covered, and unless your building or contents have actually caught fire. Bushfire related power outages, check your PDS. This is a very nuanced and sometimes difficult to understand part of insurance. A flood is often excluded from your cover. So for people who are in areas that have been affected by flooding, it's something to really take into consideration. It's normally something that you have to opt into rather than opt out of. However, stormwater tends to be covered in your policy. So as a general rule, if stuff is rising, you're probably going to need extra insurance. If it's falling, it should be in there. Check your PDS to make sure. They will often let you know when you're on the phone to them. They'll say you're in a flood risk area, so I'd highly recommend taking this out. It's going to be up to you whether you want to do that. Certain items might not be covered, so these are normally things that you can pick up and take with you. So just double check all of these. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because we're running short on time. However, sometimes they don't have an obligation to run through all these specifics with you. That obligation is going to be on you guys to go through your PDF and make sure it's clear. You understand which things are excluded. Maintaining your property. Now, this is a tricky thing that insurers can do sometimes, is that they will often try on the wear and tear sort of objection. This is information coming from Consumer Action Law Centre. They mentioned that happens quite often. So, maintain your property as best you can, clean your gutters, do all those things to reduce that risk. And if they give you that response, you might want to consider looking into some other avenues of appealing that decision. Making an inventory of your belongings, pretty straightforward. So like I mentioned, if your home is completely destroyed, they often don't ask for an inventory. If your home's partially destroyed, they will almost always ask for an inventory of exactly what was in there, what is it, what's the make and model, when did you purchase it, where did you purchase it from, what did it cost, and then if you wanted to add some more specifics for yourself, then this would be a good thing to have. One way of sort of shortening this time frame to do all these things is you can just go home, run around your house, take a video, go around all of the important things and get all that detail in there. But always good to have both. Electronic documents, I sort of mentioned this, good things to keep handy online: birth certificate, Centrelink paperwork, driver's license, insurance, marriage, passports. I think you guys can put two and two together with what's important documents to you. Read over your insurance policy. If you can get insurance if you can afford it. If you have insurance, read over it. Make sure that it's going to be covering you to rebuild, cover everything you own, know what your exclusions and limitations are, and does it cover the disaster events that are likely to happen in your area. So for you guys here, it's mostly probably storms, floods, bushfires, sometimes earthquakes, who knows? But that's yeah, anyway. Now, we are a generalist CLC, so we deal with a lot of different things. There are specialist CLCs, so community legal centres. Financial Rights Legal Centre, they deal much more directly with insurance matters. If you need to go to court, they might be able to represent you in court. So they also have some great resources online. So what happens if a tree falls, and who's going to be responsible for cleaning that up in a storm? So you can go on their website and have a look. I've also put some of those details in there too.
Is that number going to be 1300?
It is. You've got a great eye. Sorry about that.
And Sue's got some brochures at the back.
Sue's got brochures. Go grab a brochure. Consumer Action Law Centre also deals with insurance matters, and they also have a career helpline. If you're experiencing financial hardship, they've also got a debt helpline as well, but they can offer you financial counselling. Disaster Legal Help Victoria, which work in partnership with CLCs, they might also be good to give a phone call to, and they might have some more information for you. And that's it.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. So our buddies over at Social Security Rights Victoria, did I get out of that? Have kindly sent us through a little video just with some information on the services that they provide as well. This is a quick, oops, it's not just quick interrupt.
Can we leave the questions so the presentations can be done, so the questions can be asked after we've got 2 more presentations? Thank you.
We'll have lots of Q&A time.
Is it working?
Yeah. Sorry guys, we don't have any sound coming through the TV, but we do have it on here, and there is subtitles. Maybe we'll move this to the front. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark from Social Security Rights Victoria, SSRV. I'm going to take 5 minutes to talk to you about Social Security, Centrelink, disasters, our services, and the relationship between those things. Our key message is, if you think you have a legal issue associated with Social Security, call SSRV. Let's start with the basics. Social Security entitlements in Australia are governed by the law, the Social Security Act, and that Act is administered by Centrelink, and many of us have a relationship with Centrelink. It's not an easy job they have to administer dozens and dozens of different payments, everything from the farm household allowance to double off pension, millions of decisions every year about eligibility for payments, how much the payment will be, whether a debt has accrued, how that debt will be repaid, whether a payment needs to be cancelled. It's complex and it operates at a huge scale. And for that reason, all Centrelink decisions are subject to review, both internally by a different Centrelink officer and externally by 2 levels of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. SSRV works with people who are experiencing Social Security legal issues, and in some cases we represent people at the AAT to look for a decision to be reviewed or changed. We also operate a worker helpline, which means that workers, such as financial counsellors, health workers, community workers, can call us to ask questions about their client's Social Security legal situation. Now you might be thinking, that's all very well, but how often does the decision get changed? Well, we know that in financial year 2021, the AAT heard about 10,000 matters, and the decision was changed in 24% of cases. It's basically 1 in 4. So what about disasters? Well, we know that disasters can cause or exacerbate Social Security legal issues. Some examples. Might be living in a house that's been damaged by flood or fire, you had to move somewhere else. Meanwhile, important correspondence from Centrelink gets mailed to the house you're not living in, and decisions get made on the basis of those letters being unanswered. Or the people that you are now living with because your house is uninhabitable, those circumstances might cause your payment to be changed. In the case of the pandemic, we know that many people struggle to meet Centrelink's requirements because of various aspects of the lockdown. And we also know that the border closures impacted people's ability to apply for things like the age pension. We also know that about 1 in 7 of the calls that we received in the last 3 years came from disaster-affected local government areas. We've identified a range of law reform opportunities that could be made to ensure that the law interacts more effectively with people who are affected by disaster. So one of the other bills also ask us about insurance. We're not insurance specialists, so we generally refer those questions to a specialist such as the Consumer Action Law Centre.
That's not supposed to be Kansas
There
Consumer Action.
are
Consumer Action.
insurance situations and social security situations. For example, there are different treatments for the assets test as it relates to a home compared to the assets test as it relates to an insurance payout for a home. So to summarise, our message is settling decisions are made on the basis of the Social Security Act. They're subject to review. They often get changed when those reviews are made. Social Security Rights Victoria works with people and with workers to support people experiencing Social Security legal issues, including in disaster situations. So, if you have a legal situation related to Social Security, call SSR.
SSRB, not P. Okay, cool. Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague Anita.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just going to talk really quickly, as Ebony flagged, we're going to have a little chat now about what to do in the aftermath of a disaster. Just like to acknowledge that a lot of people in the room have some very recent experience in this space. Also like to acknowledge the anniversary as well, and that it's a pretty tricky day. We're experiencing one of our first heat waves for the summer, coinciding with this anniversary, and what we're talking about, it's a bit of a tricky conversation, so look after yourselves as we go through. So, I feel like I've opened the wrong presentation, but anyway, my name's Anita, so you know. Alright, so, no, that's fine, thank you. I'd just like to also add my acknowledgement that I am privileged to live, work and play on beautiful Wurundjeri country, and pay my big respects as well to Aboriginal people, elders past, present and emerging, and anyone who is from those communities here with us today. We've already given the disclaimer. I'll just add that while I am technically a lawyer, I am not an insurance lawyer, as Ebony flagged. We are privileged to be working in this space as a local lead agency in partnership with Disaster Legal Help, who provided this information for us to then take out to community and share. So our job is to spread the information that they've put together for us. We are not, as we said, subject matter experts, so we'll take your questions at the end of the session, as Sue's mentioned, and do that to the best of our ability, but can probably flag that most of our answers will be, as we've heard, we'll need to check each individual policy and PDS. So we're going to just look quickly today about the aftermath of what happens in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, the process around making a claim through our insurers, and what happens if we're not happy with that process and if we have a dispute as a result. I don't think this slide is technically necessary, but just for the sake of completeness in our messaging, of course, whilst it's very important to be getting onto our insurers as soon as we possibly can, in the aftermath of a disaster, absolutely your priority is making sure that you, your family, your animals are safe. So that's our absolute priority. But then once that is taken care of, as soon as possible, we want to be making sure we're getting in contact with our insurance company. So it's possible that in the aftermath of a disaster, the aspects of that disaster are continuing. It's not necessarily a single moment event. So there could be ongoing damage that's happening. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get in contact. So some of your policies will actually require you get in contact within a certain period, and if you don't, that could actually impact your ability to claim at all. So it is really important, even if the so-called damage hasn't actually finished happening, to actually still get in contact with your insurer. So also, again, we talked about taking photos of what happens before the disaster. Equally, we want to take a photo of what's happened in the aftermath of that disaster. So particularly before anyone's done any works or any repairs or anything to make safe, we want to be collecting as much evidence that we can show that this damage that's occurred has occurred in the aftermath of this disaster or as a result of this disaster. So that can include taking the photos or the videos we talked about. It might also be talking to people who might be eyewitnesses of what's actually happened, gathering that information so that we're able to, if there's any sort of challenging of our claim, that we're actually able to present that evidence. And when we're contacting the insurance company and providing this information, a diary is going to be a friend of yours in this process because, like we've heard, insurance claims can take quite a long time, can be quite complex and fraught. There can be a lot of phone calls, a lot of people coming out, lots of information. If you can have a diary where you're jotting down, whether it's electronic or physical, but keeping notes of when you've talked to who you've talked to, their roles. Oh, 5 minutes went pretty fast. Thanks, Sue. Then that's going to be really helpful in that process. And then it is also our duty in the aftermath of a disaster to take steps to make sure we've tried to prevent any further damage from happening. So that might be putting tarpaulins over where there's been a damage to a roof, for example. Again, you're going to want evidence to show the insurer that you've done that so that you're not copying any responsibility for contributing to that damage. So after the disaster has happened, we've got a whole list of different considerations to keep in mind. I'd just like to flag all the information that we're covering in the slides. You'll get the slides, but if you head over to the Disaster Legal Help's website, a lot of this stuff is explained in a lot more detail. They've got wonderful fact sheets there, so I can recommend checking out their website if you'd like to review or revisit some of this information. So again, we had to take an inventory of assets before the disaster. Taking one afterwards is also going to be helpful, particularly if we haven't done one beforehand. And not just think about the big ticket items, but you want to think about the things, even though they're little things like clothes, might in and of themselves, the individual items, not cost very much. When you're replacing an entire wardrobe, it's going to take a big chunk of money to do so. So we want to be thinking about actually what we need to be replaced as a result of that damage. We talked about emergency accommodation already and the fact that there's likely to be a cap on that. So to be finding out what our options are and be getting some legal advice about that. We can consider applying to our insurer for upfront payment to get us out of that immediate situation, or possibly look at some financial hardship support. But what we need to know about that is that's going to come out of our insurance payout. It's not something that's on top of our insurance payout. That's going to come out and be deducted from our future insurance payout if that applies for us. We talked a little bit before about cleanup and repair. So again, that's something that we want to be really clear in communicating with our insurer. We don't want to be taking any action to do any repair or any cleanup without talking to our insurer, and make sure that if we've got some limitations within that, what is our scope, where's the discretion, and get again some legal advice if you do need to around that space. You've got access to free legal help. We're your local lead agency, so very happy for you to come to us. Like we've mentioned the other services, you can still come to us first. It's totally fine as your local service, and we can find the appropriate help, whether it's us or someone else. And financial counselling services are also going to be free, and we've mentioned some of those today as well. This one is, again, pretty obvious. Our responsibility when we're making a claim in this process is that we need to establish that there's been damage as a result of an incident that's not our fault, and that our policy actually covers us for this damage. The insurer is going to be doing their best to try and establish that actually the policy wording excludes us from that entitlement. So that's where it comes back to that point to actually make sure we're reading our policy really carefully and really clearly, and having that information there, and also gathering that evidence of the damage. So some things to be aware of. As we said, if we fast track, we ask for an urgent upfront payment that can be taken out of our overall settlement or payout or claim. Somebody raised with us before in their first session about the option that insurers will often try and encourage us to accept is a cash settlement rather than the insurer taking on the works to do the replacement of the property. So this is potentially a very fraught option. There's lots of complications with it. Highly strongly recommend that you get financial and legal advice before considering accepting a cash settlement. You're not obliged to accept one, and there's can be quite some significant complications with that. Look at that in a second. And then also be aware of storm chasers. I'm not sure if that's been something that's come up in the aftermath of the storm in 2021, but these are businesses or individuals who proclaim that they've got expertise to help us go through the process, but then end up taking a chunk out of our entitlements from the settlement process when you could be accessing the free advice from those services we've talked about. So this is the timeline. It's probably quite hard to see. I don't know about you, but from my angle, I can't actually read these lovely blues and greens. You will get this, as I said, the slides later. But again, just to reiterate, we're talking to the insurer as soon as possible. We could potentially get an advance payment within 5 business days if we apply for it. The insurer's got 10 working days to respond to let us know if they need more information or if they're in a position to approve or deny it. If there's no exceptional circumstances, the insurer's got 4 months to make that final decision. And if there is exceptional circumstances, a bit longer, and as we said, the emergency accommodations usually looking at around that 12-month mark. So we mentioned the bell. I'm not going to go back over this again, but it's good, just some extra information for you to have as your reference on the slides. Now to insurance disputes. So obviously our role as a legal centre, particularly working with our Rangers Council on the storm response from 2021 and in this space generally responding to disasters, we're most often going to be on the scene when there's an insurance dispute. It's very common for those to come through to us, and you could probably tell me what the most common dispute issues might be, but of course we're talking about delays, pressuring for settlements, denial of claims, where there's partial damage, some argument about the contributory negligence, all of those sorts of things. There's lots of different ways we can have a dispute. There could also be an issue with our cash settlement. Now the thing about cash settlements is if they've happened within a month of the incident, then we've got 12 months to reopen that cash settlement. But if it's outside of that 1 month, then we've got to go through the internal dispute process with the insurer. So timelines are really important, and this is why getting advice is extremely helpful. If we have a dispute, as you probably know, we have to go through our insurer directly and attempt it internally first and satisfy that we've exhausted that option first. So we go to the insurer, and they must have their own internal process. Of course, it shouldn't cost us any money to go through this process, and as I said, you can get that support for free to help you with that. If that is not satisfactory, hasn't satisfactorily resolved our dispute, we've got 2 years to take the matter through to the body that oversees AFCA, where we can take it's like a tribunal, where we can take the case within 2 years. Again, it's free as a process, and AFCA has certain powers, and their findings can be binding on the insurance company. We're still not satisfied with that. We do have the final option of taking it through to court. Again, you're going to want to get some legal advice about how our prospects of success in that kind of process. But we've got 6 years to then take it to court from the date of the dispute. So this is just showing us how the process, just another way of representing the timeline as I've just gone through. So for your reference is a nice easy way to refer to the timelines. I'm just running through because we haven't got a lot of time left. So just the key takeaways from today. So make sure that once you've got everybody safe, to get in contact with your insurance company, even if it's not completely, the disaster hasn't completely finished. Make sure that you get legal and or financial advice depending on your circumstances as soon as possible. The sooner you can get to us, the easier it is for us to potentially help and give advice about future steps rather than trying to unpack steps that have already been taken. And make sure that we're taking lots of evidence. as lawyers, we really rely on our clients to bring us as much evidence as possible so we can take that back in the dispute process and argue the case. So we've had the disaster legal help slide already. That's the main place where we can get all those fact sheets. So again, I recommend checking out their website. And thank you very much for listening to that. All right, I think that brings us end of ECRC. Can we hand over to Anna? Oh, it doesn't have a back. So there's nothing to put up.
I'd like to introduce the next speaker, which is Adam, the Acting State Director from Salvation Army State Emergency Services. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me today, and thanks to the Yarra Rangers Council for being progressive and putting this event on. It's been a lot in the planning with all parties presenting today, and Council have had a lot to do with it, so thank you for your help and making this happen for the community. So Salvation Army Emergency Services sits under the banner of community engagement at the Salvation Army. Probably a lot of you know the Salvation Army for its Salvo stores, but we're much more than that. So we work with council mainly in a disaster, but also in relation to single incidents. And that's what I'd really like to talk about today. So I'm just going to give a couple of case studies of people that I've worked with in single incidents. So can anyone tell me what they think a single incident might be in the home? Yes?
House fire.
House fire, yeah, that's a very common one, big one, yeah. Anyone else?
Family violence.
Oh yes, car crashing into a house, yeah. What was the other one?
Family violence.
Yes, it can be including a home invasion or something like that, yeah. Burst pipe, yes, that's another one, yeah. It's another common one. So yeah, there's a few there. I mean, most of the ones that I attend, that I go out and see, people that I go and meet that have had a single incident is a house fire. And unfortunately, most of the time when we have these, the people aren't covered by any insurance at all. So I suppose my takeaway is just to investigate affordable insurance options, even if it's quite limiting, just to look into it, because there's so many families that I deal with that don't have any cover at all and find themselves in a bit of a predicament. So normally we get involved pretty much at the time of a single incident, like mainly a fire, and we're referred by the council, and we go out on the scene and see the people and offer some financial assistance. We also work with council to find some temporary accommodation if that accommodation options aren't available. So a lot of the time people don't have family or friends that they can stay with in the first 24 hours. So that's where council and ourselves will step in and help and make some arrangements there. And then if the people aren't covered by insurance, we'll work with the local housing agencies and providers to help get them into emergency accommodation that can go on for several months, I suppose, till options are found. So basically, one fire I attended a few months ago over the other side of the city. I met the family. It was at the time at home there was 4 young children and the mother, and the partner, he was up in Sydney on business and was flying back. So they were just at home at the time. and their house burnt down, and they did have insurance. So that was a good thing. I was very excited that they had insurance, but they still needed some help to work through the first 24 hours, and that's what Salvation Army helped with, and the local council. And then on the other hand, there was another fire I dealt with a couple of days later, and those people owned their own home, they had a mortgage and didn't have any insurance. So they had insurance for the first 12 months, and they'd owned the house for about 2 years, I think it was, around about 2 years. So for the first 12 months they had insurance because their bank asked them to provide an insurance certificate. So they provided the certificate and had the insurance. But when it came to renewal time, they decided that it was a bit too expensive and not a necessary cost, and nothing was ever going to happen to them. That they will be fine. They don't really need it. They paid for it for 12 months and didn't need it, so we don't really need it. There's a lot of spiralling costs, as we know, these days, and they just decided to say that was one thing that they could save on. Well, unfortunately, they had a mortgage, and the house got demolished and the land got sold off, and they had a mortgage of $800,000, and they were able to get $565,000 for the land. So that shortfall is still being chased by the bank to that family. So that family is still having to pay that loan off. They don't have the security anymore. They don't have the home anymore. They're currently renting a property and also paying off their previous home loan with nowhere to live. Well, got somewhere to live, the rental property, but yeah, they're having to pay money for basically nothing. They also didn't have any contents insurance either, so we had to help them out with sourcing new items through salvo stores and other means, and other agencies helped out with re-establishing them in their rental home. A lot of people that we also deal with live in rental accommodation and don't have any insurance, and basically you can probably insure a basic contents policy for less than $1 a day to have contents insurance, and a lot of people don't have that because, you know, when they buy a house and have a mortgage, the bank say, where's your insurance certificate? So then they think of insurance. But because they're renting a property, they don't have any one saying you should have insurance. So they just don't think of it, and they might be renting for several years, like 5 years, 10 years, and gathering a lot of worldly possessions, which then happen to get lost in a fire. So yeah, it's quite amazing how many people that we come across that we go and see that don't have any insurance at all, and you know, have to re-establish themselves. So yeah, I mean, sometimes we deal with people that do have good insurance cover and things like that. So a while ago I went to a house in Brighton, and this gentleman's out in the street in sort of ash-covered pyjamas with his dressing gown on, and he had nothing. He was just had the clothes that he was in. So his wallet was inside the house, melted, mobile phone, car went up in flames as well in the garage, absolutely nothing. So just at that point. So he had insurance, but it was the middle of the night, couldn't get onto his insurer, so that's where council stepped in and organised some emergency accommodation, and we organised an emergency payment for the gentleman so he could buy some essential items from you know, the 24-hour supermarket or Kmart or one of those places. And we also provided some material aid as well, some toiletries and some extra clothing as well in the middle of the night. So yeah, it just, these single incidents don't seem to discriminate against anyone. They can happen to anyone. And you know, we deal with people that are like that probably billionaire in Brighton through to someone living in a Department of Housing property. And we go out and help those people. So yeah, I've been talking to local government across the state for a while now about the importance of education around insurance, and you know, because of the encounters that I've had with dealing with people that have had either no insurance or been underinsured, or have insurance but you know just need a bit of advocacy and helping them walk through the process. So thanks for all attending today, and that's about all from me. Thank you.